Every single time a cell in your body divides, there's a tiny chance something small goes wrong, a copying error that could eventually turn into cancer. So an animal with more cells and far more cell divisions over its lifetime should logically face a much higher lifetime risk of cancer, more rolls of the dice. An elephant has about 100 times more cells than a human does. By that math alone, elephants should, in theory, be dropping dead from cancer constantly. Instead, elephants get cancer at a noticeably lower rate than humans do. Less than 5% of elephant deaths are linked to cancer at all. Meanwhile, a mouse, with only a tiny fraction of an elephant's total cells, faces a far higher relative cancer risk across its short life. The math simply runs backwards. This backwards relationship has an actual name. In 1975, an epidemiologist named Richard Peto pointed it out clearly enough that it's now called Peto's paradox. Body size and cancer risk across species simply don't line up the way the basic math predicts they should. Something else is clearly happening underneath it all. It isn't one single answer either. Different large, long-lived animals appear to have independently evolved their own separate defenses against cancer. Three of the clearest examples come from wildly different corners of the whole animal kingdom, and each one solved the same problem in its own separate way. Start with the elephant. Humans carry 2 copies of a gene called TP53, sometimes nicknamed the guardian of the genome, inside every single cell. TP53's job is to catch cells carrying dangerous damage and either force them to repair themselves or trigger their own destruction before they can turn cancerous. An elephant doesn't carry just 2 copies of that gene either. Research has found elephants carry roughly 20 extra copies on top of the usual pair. More copies simply means more of that damage-catching machinery running constantly in every single cell across an enormous, remarkably long-lived body. When elephant cells are deliberately exposed to damage in a lab setting, they respond by self-destructing far more readily than comparable human cells do. It's a fairly blunt strategy, in a sense. Rather than trying to perfectly repair every single damaged cell, the elephant's body would often rather just remove it entirely. Across a lifetime of trillions upon trillions of extra cell divisions, that aggressive 20-fold backup system appears to be doing most of the heavy lifting. A completely different solution shows up in a much smaller, much stranger animal, the naked mole rat, a small burrowing rodent that almost never seems to get cancer at all. In decades of careful laboratory study, naked mole rats have shown a cancer rate close to 0, a near total immunity that genuinely stunned the researchers who found it. Part of the answer is a sugar-like substance called high molecular weight hyaluronan, which naked mole rats produce in far larger amounts than nearly any other mammal. That thick, sticky substance builds up steadily in the spaces between cells, and it seems to physically stop early cancerous cells from crowding together and multiplying. This connects to something called contact inhibition, a rule most healthy cells already follow, where simply touching a neighboring cell tells a cell to stop dividing. In naked mole rats specifically, that stop signal is unusually strict and unusually sensitive, shutting down runaway growth almost the very instant it starts. Naked mole rats also live far longer than their small body size would ever predict, often past 30 years, many times longer than similarly sized rodents. A small, unglamorous, nearly blind animal, living quietly underground its whole life, turns out to be one of the best protected creatures against cancer on the entire planet. The third example lives at the opposite extreme of size entirely, the bowhead whale, one of the largest animals alive and also one of the longest lived. Some bowhead whales are estimated to live well past 100 years old, with a handful of individuals thought to reach close to 200 years. By the basic math of cell divisions over time alone, a whale that size and that long-lived should face an extraordinary lifetime cancer risk. It simply doesn't. When researchers sequenced the bowhead whale's genome, they found unusual versions of genes involved in repairing damaged DNA and controlling cell growth. Some of those genes appear to help the whale's cells fix damage more efficiently, catching small problems before they can accumulate into something dangerous. Others seem tied to slower, more careful cell division in general, a body that simply refuses to rush the process, where mistakes are most likely to happen. A massive body, an extremely long life, and still one of the lowest measured cancer rates of any mammal ever studied. Its own entirely separate answer to the same problem. It's worth pausing on one popular claim here, because it simply doesn't hold up. You may have heard that certain large sea creatures never get cancer at all. That version of the story has been carefully checked, and it's false. Documented tumors have been found in exactly those animals. Almost never is not the same as never. The real story is more interesting anyway. Not zero cancer, achieved by some kind of magic, but dramatically reduced cancer, achieved by traceable, evolved biology. None of these defenses were designed with any purpose in mind at all. Cancer resistance simply became a quiet matter of survival once bodies got large enough or lived long enough. A larger, longer-lived body faces cancer risk on a much bigger scale than a smaller, shorter-lived one ever does. So evolution, over millions of years, kept answering back. Human researchers have taken real serious notice of all this. Some cancer studies now specifically examine elephant TP53 activity, looking for ways to translate it into new treatments. Early laboratory experiments have tested giving human cancer cells access to elephant-style TP53 activity, then watching closely how they respond to damage. It's early work, cautious and incomplete, but the idea itself is direct. Study the animals that already solve this problem, then ask what we can learn from them. The naked mole rat's hyaluronan and the bowhead whale's repair genes are being studied along similar lines for entirely separate reasons in each case. It's easy to look at cancer as something entirely universal, something every large, long-lived body simply has to accept as an unavoidable cost of existing. These three animals suggest otherwise. Somewhere in their own particular biology, each one found its own separate way to push back against the same basic math. None of it happened on purpose, and none of it offers complete protection. But it's real, it's measurable, and in at least 3 very different cases, it clearly works. Maybe the most striking part isn't even the size of these animals, or how long they live. It's how many separate times the same problem got quietly solved. 3 unrelated animals, 3 completely unrelated strategies, all converging on the same outcome, bodies that simply refuse to let the odds catch up with them. That same elephant from the very beginning, standing calm and enormous with 100 times more cells than you, it was never the paradox it first appeared to be. It was simply carrying, in every single one of those trillions of cells, 20 extra copies of a gene doing exactly the job it had evolved to do. If this changed how you think about size, age, and risk across the animal kingdom, subscribe. We keep pulling apart the hidden systems behind the wild. We keep pulling apart the hidden systems behind the wild, one strange, unglamorous, and quietly brilliant survival trick at a time. The wild mind is everywhere around us, hiding in plain sight, sometimes 20 extra gene copies deep and older than we ever guessed. Keep looking. I'll see you in the next one.